Okay, well today I'm going to be taking a look at the Marvel Legends Maestro Deluxe figure. This release continues the recent trend of Hasbro experimenting with different formats, and I'm really a big fan of this deluxe figure range because essentially these are figures that would have been released as builder figures, whereby you'd have to buy, say, 6 or 7 sometimes action figures to build up this one figure. And that's fine if you want every figure in the wave, but when you don't, it can become quite expensive quite quickly, and yeah, it can be you can either end up with an incompleted figure or some extras that you don't really want. And thankfully these deluxe figures, although much more pricey than a regular carded release, they are more affordable than, say, a whole wave or a builder figure would be. Which, to my mind, is a much fairer strategy to collectors and is one I'm definitely willing to support. So then, why Maestro? Well, for those who aren't aware, Maestro is a sort of evil version of the Hulk from the future. He makes his first appearance during the Peter David run in Future Imperfect, a special 2-issue mini-series that are effective like mini graphic novels. In that story, the Maestro Hulk was represented as the character who had basically taken down the rest of the Marvel Universe and killed them, and he had a fabulous trophy room of all different things, so, Captain America's broken shield, Thor's hammer, things like that. The character was well received, and so of course he's reappeared several times across the years since. And he sported a few different looks. But a few years ago he was reintroduced into the Marvel Universe in quite a significant way, appearing in several different titles but also getting his own comic. And it's predominantly from this run that this figure takes its inspiration. The packaging is fairly simple. It is essentially a big window display where we can see the figure in all his glory, and the insert at the back there's a nice vibrant green. Meanwhile, on the side panel we can see some fantastic art, and I think this is by Deodato Jr., and it looks really fantastic. It's very displayable if you want to store them on its side on a shelf, say. Meanwhile, on the reverse we have the same image, but writ large this time, and a little bit of information about Maestro himself. So overall, I really like this approach. I think the image is fantastic, and I really love that they utilise this comic book art, and yeah, very presentable, looks really good. Okay, and straight out the packaging, he looked pretty fantastic, very imposing. He's obviously a massively oversized Marvel Legends figure, and he looks really good. And as you can see, there's a lot of different articulation points here, and I think the overall presentation is pretty solid. I think they've definitely caught the look of the Maestro in the sculpt. I think this is pretty much perfect, really. I couldn't fault it. I love that we can see his big chunky teeth there. The beard is really good, and it's nice that there's a little bit of paint wash around the eyes as well. There's a little bit of darkness there, which is great. It's a shame there isn't a bit more of that going on in the hair and in the beard. It's just like a lighter wash, a black wash in there, just to make it look a little bit more like there's different colours going on, just a bit more realistic. Now, they have moulded his hair so it's in this very hard plastic, and it is swept to the side as if it is, being windswept. That's great for certain looks. It's not maybe always appropriate. I don't think it's particularly bad, and I can see what they were going for here. And in the main, I think this works pretty well. Now, you'll notice he also has his gold chain. This is a pretty flimsy bit of plastic. It's all moulded in one colour, and there is no shading on it at all. Thankfully, though, they have taken the trouble to add a little bit of shading and a bit of a paint wash over his torso, so there's a little bit of darkness there, just defining some of the detail, and this looks pretty solid. Sadly, the same can't be said for his hands, or his gauntlets, or even his pants, which is a little bit of a shame, because a little bit of a paint wash over these would have really enhanced the detail, made it look a little bit more authentic and a bit more detailed. And I find this slightly frustrating, especially with a deluxe figure like this, because obviously they cost a lot more, and so you feel like, there could have been a bit more attention applied to this. And you have to bear in mind that this figure costs roughly the same, or maybe even a little bit more than a Marvel Select version of the same character, and you think about the amount of detailing and paint that you get in that figure compared to this. Moving on to the articulation, well, he's got the ball jointed neck, meaning of course he can spin his head from side to side, and he can kind of move it up and down. Although the range of motion here isn't that strong, it isn't that dynamic. There's certainly a bit of give, but it's not a lot really in the scheme of things. But he definitely makes up for this in the shoulder department, because you'll notice there's an extra joint that meets the ball jointed shoulder. Right here, there's the inner shoulder, and there's an extra joint here that just pulls back and just allows a greater range of motion for the arms to really arch back, and I think this is fantastic. As you can see, this supports the ball jointed shoulder right here, which is fantastic. Huge range of motion here, which is brilliant. He's also got a bicep swivel, and he's got the single jointed elbow as well, which also swivels. So plenty of motion here, which is absolutely fantastic. This is quite dynamic, so I like this a lot. He's also got the swivel and hinge wrist there as well, which is fantastic. And the plastic gauntlets are a separate piece, meaning that they don't interfere with the articulation whatsoever, and if you want, you can slip them off. Meanwhile, he has his chest joint that allows his body to sort of arc from side to side, but it won't allow him to swivel from side to side particularly. It won't really hold, it won't really move that way, but it does give a range of motion the other way, which is great. Now thankfully he does have a swivel at the waist, which means of course he can swivel there. He's got the ball jointed hips, meaning he can kick his legs out to the side, and you'll notice there's also an upper thigh swivel there as well. He can kick his legs forward and to the side a little bit, and he can kind of get them back a little distance, which isn't too bad. He's got double jointed knees, which is great, and of course he's got those ankle rockers as well, meaning of course that his foot can pivot from side to side and arch up and down. He is pretty light when it comes to extras. All he comes with is an extra pair of closed fists, which I'm very grateful to have. But again, not a lot of, well, in fact, there's zero paint apps here. There's no wash over these. So there is that tendency for them to look a little bit plasticky. And again, that seam there going across the knuckles, it just doesn't look very good. So I think it's a shame that we didn't get more. Now you might be thinking, well, okay, Maestro doesn't need anything else. He is basically just a Hulk, so what accessories would you give him? Well, I do think that with the Maestro, there are different things you could have given him, to be honest. I think it would have been cool to have given him, say, a broken shield of Captain America, or like I said, a damaged Thor's hammer, or something like that. These are things I think Hasbro have plenty of already, so it would have been easy enough to just throw them in. But overall, I think he has a pretty fantastic look, and I'm really grateful that they give him those gauntlets and the chain around his neck. And yeah, you know, I think with mixing up the hands there is really effective, and I think this is, you know, a very visually appealing character. I think they've done a really good job on the sculpt of this. Okay, so if you're wondering how he compares in terms of scale, here he is standing next to the recently released Joe Fixit Build-A-Figure. So again, another Hulk, a Hulk by a different colour. But yeah, I think this looks really good. Obviously, Maestro is much bigger, he's taller, and he's obviously much broader than Joe Fixit. And this is entirely appropriate. I would expect to see this, so this is really good. Here he is with another Build-A-Figure, this time it's Strong Guy from X Factor, and again, he obviously is much bigger, much taller, and much more visually overbearing, so yeah, spot on. This time here we have him with Terrax, so I think, yeah, again, this looks pretty accurate. I think this feels pretty authentic, so I'm really pleased with this. And here he is next to Battle Damaged Wolverine from the recent Amazon exclusive set. And yeah, this scaling looks brilliant. Love this. Finally, here he is against your average size Marvel Select. So I've chosen the Silver Centurion Iron Man, and you can see he towers above him. And even this scaling isn't bad, to be honest, although obviously it's not quite accurate. So then, final thoughts and a final score of 4 stars from me. I really like this figure. I think the articulation is fantastic. I think the sculpt is really strong. What lets him down, though, I think just it's the level of detailing. I think it would have been nice to have just a little bit more of a paint wash going through the rest of his body. Certainly in the hair and in the pants would have been really appreciated. Also, it would have been really nice if they just thrown in a couple of little extras, whether it's, I don't know, Magneto's helmet or Wolverine's arm, something like that. That would have been really cool, just to build that trophy room. I think these are pieces that already exist. They've been released many times, so it wouldn't have taken much effort to just maybe repaint them slightly differently, or just adjust the mold slightly so there's a dent in the helmet, for example. Things like that would have been pretty straightforward, and I think it would have been nice little extra, and it would have been true to the character, and it would have been fun for fans as well. But that said, the figure on his own stands up very well. I think the articulation is fantastic, and overall he's a very solid figure. So if you're on the fence about getting him, I think if you can get him for a reasonable price, then he's absolutely going to be worth it. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.